What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for Your Overwatch. Super excited to finally be bringing you the Ana 2.0 Mastery Guide. Between balance changes by Blizzard, as well as the direction for the game towards the sequel, Ana has been positioned to be an incredibly powerful pick, and possibly one of the highest skills ceiling in the entire game. Ana is a carry hero, which means due to her skills ceiling, if you actualize it, you can pop off so hard that yes, you can and will solo carry games. But what it takes is actualizing Ana's balanced playstyle. Long ago, you may have learned to use her primarily as a healer, hiding from the engagement largely, but with the hero shooter meta, as well as one tank being removed for Overwatch 2, the entire game is more about using cover to create pressure. If you want to focus on healing, there's other supports that are better at it. In today's video, we're going to explain every Ana principle I can think of, from the most fundamental to the most abstract. So no matter what your level of play is, this guide should help you master Ana 2.0.
But first, a message from today's video sponsor, Opera GX, a web browser finally designed for gamers like you and me. Last time, I told you about Opera GX's cool optimization features to not bog down your PC while you're gaming, but I got a few other things to show you.
Opera GX has Twitch integration, so I easily can get in to see which one of my favorite streamers is online. Go right to J3. This dark mode is legendary. I can't live without it. Flashbang warning. Pop! Look at that! Never look at blinding pages again. Opera GX has a built-in ad blocker and VPN. And on top of the cool wallpapers you can choose, now there's animated wallpapers. Here's an anime version called In the Snow. Oh, that's just beautiful. That makes scrolling through my GX Corner daily news feed even more enjoyable. New to Opera GX is the quick import tool, where if you're like me, you have loads of bookmarks that you'd like to easily import in one button press. Instantly, it's right there.
It's really cool that Opera GX has improved on things even since the last time I told you about them. It's time to drop Google Chrome. The web browser metagame is getting dominated by Opera GX. It's time to switch. Do so today by clicking the link in the description. It supports the channel and it's going to support yourself. Your eyes will thank you from not being flashbanged from every other website. Now that there's a forced dark mode that actually works, you're going to appreciate it. Click the link in the description to download Opera GX today.
Starting out with the most foundational, your crosshair control or aim technique. Ana is an FPS character, so all her skills are going to unravel once you master the core of moving, aiming, and timing her shots and abilities. If you watch your replays and you see yourself have multiple shots in a row whiffing on targets right in front of you, that indicates a serious problem that is going to need focused training in order to correct. Like with learning any difficult skill, you should attempt focused practice, not aimless practice. At the very least, queuing for a deathmatch type mode in between your queue times, or when you're taking a break, or when you have a schedule to commit. Everyone's different with how they learn, but more importantly, try to regiment it to work on the different mechanical skill sets we're going to go to explain now. The first one builds all the rest of them. Crosshair placement is key with Ana. I've seen a lot of players confuse this term with aiming. No. Crosshair placement is preparation before aiming. In this deathmatch clip, all three enemies are taken down, not by me reacting with skill, but just predicting where they're going to be coming out when we turn the corner. Crosshair placement is preparation. And as you move through the map, to make sure that you keep your crosshair prepped for where a heal or damage target will emerge, you'll minimize the aiming requirement and instead be able to focus on timing and syncing the shot in front of you that's presented on a silver platter with pressing your trigger. That is a lot easier than actually aiming. A lot of the time, you can just hold your angle and let the targets walk into your crosshair, pulling it when they get there. Try to move your crosshair as little as possible during team fights when it doesn't require you to adjust. You might be shocked to realize how little you are in danger a lot of the time playing Ana, because you should be further in the back. So because of that, you have the time to carefully not miss. And one of the biggest lower rank aim mistakes I find is players moving their crosshair too much. Try to focus more on timing your shots with the crosshair leading where it's about to be, as opposed to panicking to try to hit every little thing on your screen. Because most shots don't take effort. They just take attention attention looking in the right direction. Ana's primary fire hipfire projectile is fast, so you need only lead it in front of the target's direction a little bit. And most of the time, just laying it right on top of them will do the trick. But it's made easier if you're looking to sync when you shoot the projectile out when you see the enemy begin to move into your crosshair, as opposed to expending the aiming effort to constantly adjust to them. Doing this alone will likely get you out of the bottom 2 ranks, as simply not wasting motion will provide more value than your opposing counterpart. But now, let's take it up a notch. Awkward is a tier 2 pro player that did an unranked to GM with a 98% win rate, blitzing through the metal ranks. His short stint in gold largely dominated by the fact that if you can simply land attacks on the enemy, they'll fall over, because their positioning is going to be so out in the open that focusing on punishing them with pressure will carry team fights alone. In this clip, Awkward shows off some very important techniques. First, when he turns the corner, his crosshair placement is already awaiting for the Moira to pop out. So no matter what, if he pulls the trigger now, he'll actually land the shot. But with a small delayed reaction, he is human after all, he decides to confirm the shot with a quickscope. A very important technique that you'll want to work on. It's done by having impeccable crosshair placement, and then when you notice a target is lined up, pulling up your scope and shooting at the same time, so that you get the benefit of a direct instant travel hit scan on a scope as opposed to waiting for the projectile of the dart. Throwing the ante for good measure, needing to confirm one final hit on the soldier, he slow scopes and just slightly drags his crosshair over the center of mass to connect the second shot. Most of this was done just by crosshair placement alone, turning corners, being prepared for the spots an enemy could be. In this next clip, notice how Awkward goes from applying pressure to the main front line of the enemy, but noticing a flank, and a series of high-level techniques play out at once. This is such a big Overwatch aim tip. It's so hard to learn, but I'm telling you, one of the best things you can learn in Overwatch is recognizing when your shot is on target and then just stop moving your crosshair. As Awkward turns, he's setting up to step away from the McCree, crouching to dodge a headshot, and then jumping at the point of the stun landing. All the while, his crosshair barely moves as the McCree rolls into his sleep dart. This is a combination of character movement and a lack of crosshair movement because he was already on target. I'll get into more of that when we talk about sleep darts, but further examples of how this just carries a Smurf player's gameplay at these lower ranks. Next clip is on Gibraltar, which is a famous Widowmaker map, but one where Ana can make use of sniping sightlines as well. Bit more advanced this time. On streets, he begins applying pressure and employs the double aim speed method with one fast turn to get his reticle close to the target, the Ashe, who isn't even looking at him, and then slowly and carefully moves again in order to secure the shots, tracking in tempo with his shot timings. This is very subtle and it's easy to miss, but it's actually a two-factor authenticator on your aim, where he isn't actually flicking from this much of a distance. He flicks in order to first close the distance, just to turn to get in view, and then the next series of motions is to adjust. If we look back to our first example of the low-ranked player struggling, whiffing multiple shots in a row, you can see this lack of that first stage of preparatory aim, and they're attempting to both pull the trigger as they aim each shot. That's not what you want to do. You want to stage your first placement, acquire a sense of the visuals and the relationship of your crosshair and the distance to the shots you're trying to hit, and then adjust bit by bit. Understanding that principle of Ana is going to shatter the skill floor and help you quickly rise up the skill ceiling, because building off that foundation will give you the ability to have fast reactions as well as accurate pinpoint aim when you need it. A few other aim tips for you. On long range fights, like the scope shots against the Echo, it's useful to attempt to track as it's moving 1-to-1 once you've locked onto the target, as mobile targets tend to not give you a long enough time to fully set up and take your time. But when you're turning to aim on your friendly tanks so that they're more forgiving, and a quick turn for hip fire might be just fine for them. A thing to keep in mind that Ana moves slower, and in fact a lot slower, while scoped up. So up against targets like Widowmaker, or even a flanker like Tracer, your hitbox is going to be a lot easier to hit if you stay scoped up, which is what makes quickscope tactics so powerful, because you can do it on the move. But if you're safe and need to hit subsequent range shots, the scope is preferred because you don't have travel time. But keep in mind that it does produce bullet tracers, which means if you're in a sneaky position, or if your teammate is, you'll want to try to hip fire rather than scope shot, as the bullet tracers will clearly identify where you are and where you're aiming at, and the enemy team might use that information against you. Remember that Ana doesn't headshot, so for all characters, you'll want to look at their biggest center of mass. Tanks will be their juicy bellies, but there's some other characters that are actually easier to hit in the legs, such as Pharah, Echo, or even McCree, who has a thicker base point than they do head hitbox. So don't waste time attempting hitting shots too high. I've never changed my scope sensitivity, and I don't suggest you play with a faster scope, because based on how I'm describing you want to play anyway, you'll want to be able to turn quickly normally, but then be more precise when scoped up. And that'll hold true for multiple reasons as we get through some of the other aspects of Ana's kit. The last big tip though is that as an additional alteration on your aim speed, try to do the majority of your movements between shots. Which is to say, as you're getting ready for the next follow-up shot at the tempo that Ana shoots at, shoot, adjust, slow down to ensure that your next shot is as accurate as possible. Luckily, with single-shot weapons, you don't need perfect tracking, which affords you the opportunity to turn away or change targets, land an ability elsewhere, so getting the sense of that tempo is going to unlock the rest of her kit. Keep in mind that Ana's darts do heal over time, or damage over time, which means if a target is antied, you might be able to sneak in a heal shot that will still run through its effect as the anti expires, already queuing up another heal shot to continue afterwards. Or when DPSing, keep in mind that your damage lingers and takes time to finish. So it's actually easier for the enemy to heal, but especially with either focus fire or targeting key squishies, you can still take anything down with 3 shots or 2 and a nade, making Ana a considerable DPS threat. One so good that you should consider her one of the best deterrents to flying characters like Pharah and Echo. Your damage doesn't have a fall off, so it's one of the best tools for counteracting long-range, distant foes that aren't snipers that can one-shot you back. This mechanics section isn't all about aim either. There's a lot of important movement tricks that you need to know that are going to severely help your output. A massive tip that many of you probably don't know is that Overwatch characters move faster when looking in the direction they're moving, ever so slightly, which means if you look away from a close range threat as they're chasing you, they won't close the distance on you. You may wonder why, when that Nano Reinhardt pops in your face, you turn to shoot him and he always seems to be able to catch you. Well, that's because you're not turning fast enough to move with a forward motion to maximize move speed, so don't backpedal, at least not if you're expecting to full retreat and get away. You actually want to turn away, like Awkward does here against this Diva Bomb, to secure your move around cover. Then you can look back towards the fight. One more key on a tech, that as a knockback hits you, you can jump away to amplify its effect. So a Winston who lands his jump pack on you might accidentally knock you farther away than he intended, if you use this somewhat of an exploit. It might send you too far, but it also likely will keep you out of range of his Tesla cannon follow-up. And one more key movement skill set that you'll hopefully see me using in this video frequently. This is called jiggle peeking on a corner. Great for all projectile heroes really, but as Ana, I can use the natural cover of this wall to turn my crosshair towards the Reaper to start tagging him down, making him afraid of me because I'm on a good corner, using it to make me a very hard target to hit, peeking out quickly and firing, then hiding again, whereas he's just stuck out in the open knowing he's just got to retreat. Losing a duel to a support feels bad, man. Ana does insane damage. Here, the enemy Widowmaker is attempting to spawn trap me, but aha, my cover usage is too good. I place my crosshair, scope up, secure the shot, and wiggle my head hitbox too well. She had a chance to kill me, but if I improve my quickscoping here, I could have killed her even faster. Now I want to get into discussing aim, specifically about Ana's abilities. And these, since the targets you have to hit are often at the fringes or at a weird angle in the team fight, require a little bit more reaction speed. Now, in many cases, good crosshair placement will lay your abilities into the team fight and be enough to land them. But here, I want to go over some advanced aiming techniques that can help you land your sleeps and nades. Because Sleep Dart has a delay for it to come out and it's a projectile, there's quite a lead up time from you pulling the trigger on it and it coming out. So because of that, there's a few ways you can compensate. In this clip, I see soldiers shooting and jumping, meaning his momentum is very limited. So therefore, I can do what I told you to not normally do, a flick shot that is compensating my aim during the time of pulling out the Sleep Dart launcher. This is because at the point I see him in an animation, and of course not going to run towards my Roadhog, he's gonna run away, I know that I can flick behind him in the direction he's going to land the Sleep Dart directly where he'll be in about half a second. Conversely, my next sleep dart is the other way to land them, by placing far ahead of time in the direction of a character that I know is going to commit to this spot. I hear him cast Pile Driver, so I know he's going to land right in front of me. All I have to do is keep my crosshair there, and because I know the amount of time it's going to take for sleep to come out will line up if it's cast just slightly after Pile Driver, this sleep is incredibly easy. And that's the two ways you want to go about casting sleeps. Either placing, like you normally do, timing the interaction for when you know an enemy is going to be walking into that spot, or flicking, as I'm prepared to do against this tracer who's jumping in my face, where if you have to do an immediate reaction to save yourself at 30 HP, you'll need to turn on that quick turn speed to adjust with your muscle memory so you're aiming while the sleep animation is committing. In some cases, doing anything less is too slow. In deathmatch or quick play, it'll be useful to practice these different types of sleeps in a low-risk environment, especially against squishy targets with small hitboxes. Knowing a character's hitbox as well as their movement abilities really helps you with this, as you can compensate specifically for how they move. And landing sleeps often isn't so much about your ability to aim them, but your ability to read the shots in front of you and what's going to be required for you to land a high percentage chance. Here's an example of a clip of an overcorrection. This player, with really fast turn speed all the time, is scrambling to find his Genji teammate to cast Nano before the guy dashes away, finally gets it on him, and the whole hog, who's more or less slowly blasting away in the corner, not even looking at us, we react far too quick and lead our crosshair as if Hog had some really quick movement ability. Unless Hog shoots at us, we're uncontested, which means we don't need to be reacting at this speed at all. This instead was a slow, careful crosshair situation that would have netted us and canceling an ultimate. We were set up great for it, we just rushed it and overcommitted more mouse movement when it wasn't necessary. Watch this next clip as Fielder looks completely unamused by the enemy's primal rage. And it's things like this that makes tanking at a high level so difficult, because pros are so reliable at not missing a sleep dart. This is a technique that I've called over the years laning the projectile. As the primal jumps towards him, Fielder gets himself in a tight choke point in a spot that if the primal wants to come at him, he has a very specific small window of his screen where the shot even can be. Close range characters with melee attacks have to get on you. So if the position you stand in requires them to come down a hallway, well, you're cutting out like such a high percentage of options of where they could go. And luring big meaty tanks without a shield into these kinds of lanes will give you free sleep dart value for days. Here's a clip of me using this technique against a Winston in White Halls on Lijiang. And note, there will be separate chapters in the video dedicated to matchups against Winston as well as many other characters. But for now, as far as mechanics are concerned, I want you to consider anytime using a sleep in this laning the projectile style of way, which is to say, even if you don't have a convenient doorway or window in order to pull enemies into to bait into easier sleeps for yourself, you can imagine them if you start to think about the movement opportunities of the enemy, or at least what their intentions are. This sleep on the enemy Echo looks flashy until you realize it was gifted to me by incredibly predictable movement. Echo, when flying, falls carefully and slowly, and she's so out of position here, she's likely going to hard W towards the duel, because flying away backwards is just not really going to be an option. Of course, we SMG to wake her up for no reason, but the principles remain the same. Sometimes you'll guess wrong on the directionality the enemy takes and they might juke you, but thinking of it this way is the right way to learn how to hit the hardest sleeps reliably when there isn't an easy one available. Next up, let's talk about nade mechanics. The arc of the nade is shallow enough that it's a lot easier to throw long range than you might think. For like medium to long range, it'll go basically exactly where you're aiming. These long range anti-nades I'm hitting on Petra are longer distances than you'll probably ever need. And even with that, I'm not compensating the arc that much. And since the splash is rather forgiving, think of the nade as an AoE floor ability that hits on a surface, and do less to aim the nade itself, but the splash that's going to occur once it explodes on whatever you hit. Beyond TNT, this is the only way to flush characters out from behind cover. As I said in the intro, how important it is to apply pressure in the hero shooter meta. Ana's nade is a nuke from space, which deals damage and stops enemies from getting healed, which means your teammates, and especially your tanks, can have a very easy time bullying their HP in to finish targets that you weaken. Also, just as a general theme for the video, the reasons why you want to focus on pressure is that enemies that are under pressure apply less pressure to your team. In this clip, compare Myongbong's contribution to the team, launching nades aggressively towards the Toronto Defiant, who gets stuck in a hole, applies so much pressure that even though we end up losing our main tank immediately, because the enemy's Ana got naded twice, their whole team can't really go out. Their Ana can't see as much as ours. So now 3 nades in a row, the enemy's constantly purple. That goes to show you that man advantage isn't even enough anymore. Sure, it's important, but it's not more important than map positioning that yields pressure. It's about the angles that you can land your abilities on, not how many players you have alive necessarily. But there's 2 more nades that I want to explain. One, to heal your team. Nade can essentially grant 1 extra life, but it doesn't work miracles. And nading just to heal is completely inefficient, but can turn into a big play if it's used to hit 2 targets. My Sigma, who gets hooked by a Roadhog, should be in big trouble, but timing the nade to connect to heal him up as the hook follow-up is coming through heals my teammate and antis the hog, which is a huge frontline interaction. But that also brings me to another technique that you definitely can't live without, and that is mutual nades that are going to hit both yourself and the enemy. Similar to healing a teammate in the same way, a mutual nade is going to be important to land on anything that dives you ever, as it gives you a burst of extra health while dealing damage to the enemy and denying their heals. After saving my Sigma, the enemy recognized that I'm in a very powerful position and try to duel me twice in a row. The mutual nade on the Brig helps my Sigma teammate to punish her coming in. The Sigma tries to finish me off, but by the time he approaches, my next nade is available and I can step in front of his shield to nade the both of us, confirming the kill, and before you know it, we're starting to turn this fight. These fights on payloads can be quite obnoxious with how much stall there is, which is why it's important to look for a key opportunity to land anti-nades that deal a burst of damage and deny the enemy's ability to sustain. For the next section, we'll discuss the Gamesense on how to apply these abilities in a team fight. In this first clip, our Ana is tossing out what you might call speculative abilities, where there is a low chance that they even hit at all, but also low that they'll be converted to something useful. Look at this first sleep dart. Our Ana hero has a recon dart to know no one's walking through this doorway, but even if they were, tossing out sleeps that are going to land on an opponent on the enemy side of the map, surrounded by cover and teammates, is less useful than holding the sleep to defend yourself or have an interaction on an enemy that's closer to your team who can then follow up on them. And this nade isn't too good either, because although an anti-nade on a squishy is devastating, the worst anti-nade we can get is one on a full HP tank who is around his team and can easily get away. The enemy Reinhardt, who does get antied, just retreats with his shield up and doesn't get eliminated. Meanwhile, there's an enemy Doomfist diving into our backline who would have been in severe threat against our sleep dart and Nade if we directed it at him. This gets far more complex when you think of every matchup in the game, and we'll get more specific as the video goes on, but the next most common low-ranked mistake is being a bit one-note with just kind of vaguely throwing our carry abilities into the enemy's tanking defenses. Once in a while, you can reverse psychology the enemy Rhine by tossing out a speculative sleep when you think he's going to fire strike and shut him down easily. But if you have the tendency to do that too often, well, he'll just hold up his shield forever and absorb all your carry into his shield. Or, like what ends up happening here, we can't even get past our teammates to hit the crucial anti-nade that would have closed out this checkpoint. We're playing so reserved and passive that, sure, we're in no threat of taking damage from this position, but we also can't see anything to help resolve the team fight. This becomes more clear when we look at it from the opposing team's point of view, where they're all on the back foot. Our team landing a lot of pressure abilities, a big TNT. Ryan's getting in there and swinging, trying to make the most out of what our Ana is doing. But because our Nade only heals and doesn't anti a bunch of low HP targets, we can't really confirm kills on the enemy's defensible position. And the lesson learned here is Nade is the carry ability to resolve fights. It is the nuke that when dropped in overhead allows your front line to clean up the kills. But if you play Ana inappropriately and use too many heal nades, you might sustain a bit longer, but you won't resolve a fight. And the other way to word it is you won't establish a win condition. And considering you're holding one of the best ones on cooldown in the entire game, you should use it to try to win the fight as opposed to not lose it. Because in the hero shooter pressure meta, that will always lose to the enemy confirming win conditions on you. Now, that all will become a bit more clear for you, I think, once you learn how to establish line of sight on the play. And what I mean by the play, I mean pointing your vision where it needs to be in order to interact with the win condition, whatever it might be. This is a combination of where you target your attention, but also where you position in order to establish your lines of sight. An example here are on a hero takes this really defensible narrow angle where it's hard for the enemy to see her, but it's hard for us to see anything. Realize this red Winston bubble is our barrier. So not only is this angle far better to allow us to see far more map, more of the team fight, better selection for what targets we want to shoot or heal, our Winston already committed his barrier here to make it easier for us to utilize that ground. Putting our line of sight onto the lower position gave us a thinner lane to look down and realistically only an enemy Winston bubble to shoot at. Whereas if we go up top in our own Winston bubble, we can choose to interact with the best targets on the field, which would be to either continuously heal our tank or pick a squishy out of the mix of all of them that can actually be focused down and eliminated. So that's step one. Asking yourself the question, can I even see anything? Which you'll want to be asking from moment to moment. Step two is a movement skill to read the state of the fight so that you stay in playmaking mode while also staying safe. It's the skill known as spacing, so that you move in sync parallel to your teammates that you want to help, but also remain a safe distance from the threats that can hurt you. So this Volskaya clip, we're on, again, defensible high ground position, but our tanks are pushing tight to the corner of the point, which is actually decent pathing for them, but us holding our ground as the wrecking ball pile drives us and the enemy Ashe can see us, not only should we already be dead standing here, but we're shooting at an enemy Roadhog. Okay, this is just all wrong in every single way. So although we will get to talking about the importance of high ground, what's important ahead of that is keeping in sync with your team so your LOS, or line of sight, keeps the play in focus. So realize what we did here. We naded our Reinhardt, which again, heal nade's bad. But if you do use one, your Rein thinks you're going to keep healing him to make use of the amplified healing. We don't do that. The heal nade expires. The enemy Ashe is uncontested, picking off our Lucio, luckily instead of us. Might as well have been us though. And our Rein is getting concaved by all of the enemies and we're giving him 0 healing. Meanwhile, we have Nanoboost and the enemy doesn't have a shield. Keep our Rein up here. He can close the distance and win the team fight for us. But we just whiff on our attention to the play, which you might call not enough APM, or perhaps nose for the ball is like a sports analogy I like. Either way, the correct play here, especially as the wrecking ball is coming in to dive us, is to move towards the natural piece of cover on our left, which would have kept us safe from the Ashe line of sight, requiring the ball to fight us on some cover if you wanted to dive the backline, and we'd see our Reinhardt at the same time. Capturing an objective against respawn advantage like this requires the entire team to be kept alive, or the respawns will overwhelm you. So you can't really lose anybody, but much less a tank. So the couple of poke shots we put into the Roadhog do nothing, pressure nothing. The Ashe has free fire, but even if we shot and killed her, our Ryan probably still dies. It's just multiple errors at once. When you analyze any play like this, it can get a bit overwhelming with the depth of mistakes you could be making at any given time. But at the very least, what I want you to absorb in this lesson is decide to commit to one good play at least. And this is a clip where we have two options and we do neither of them. We somehow choose a third do nothing option. Now the enemy has to cap into our respawn advantage, which means we want to defend, but more importantly, we want to make sure we confirm kills on squishies. Whether it's a healer or a damage, they'll be lacking a key component of something that's desperately required to close out a capture. Or at the very least, we want to try to survive, have them push to point, and use ults on them. If we're running the aggro Ana playbook, at the point that our diva launched a self-destruct into the backline, we needed to go hunt to find an ability and confirm an elim on them. We're standing in the position that indicates this is our goal, but we don't commit to it. Instead, we fall back to heal our Rhine. But the truth was, we were never in position to heal our Rhine. We were in position to go aggressive. So in that window of time, you have to make use of that. Otherwise, your Rhine dies for nothing. If you kill one or two while he goes down, maybe it doesn't matter. But then conversely, on the other end, we're going up against a Roadhog and a Wrecking Ball, both of which, if we just support our team and disable as they try to run us over, our front line's going to have a very easy time. So the other option we could have done is play in what is the typical Ana standard spot in the back of this platform, where she has a really easy sniper point of view and would have had a great line of sight in order to see the enemy tanks pushing forward onto our tanks. If we were standing here ahead of time, we wouldn't be panicking to try to nade our Rhine to heal him. We would have instead been able to sleep the Roadhog as soon as he starts to W. We'll go more in depth in how Ana counters Roadhog, but for this, just remember, if you don't step into the play, you won't be able to make any of the key interactions that Ana's good at. There's so many options. You can disable the aggressors, you can snipe their backline, but what you can't do is stand in the middle of both plays and do neither. This next clip, I hope, will really give you the instinct in how to apply this. More simplified map geometry for you. Our Ana hero is playing in the back, and the enemy begin to pop some ults. They've got Nano on the Rhine. Our Sigma's on a Narnia flank, but does get a kill and trades out. We have respawn advantage. That's actually a good way to play. But what it requires us to do is get active into the play and keep confirming kills. The enemy trades back and invests heavier, popping Coalescence to run over our front line. And when we hear that, our first instinct is to jump backwards and launch a nade lazily into the team fight from miles away, hoping it helps. This nade's coming in so slow and lethargic, it's carried by carrier pigeon. And conversely, look at the nade value the enemy Ana gets. Our whole team's antied, and this team fight is going to be over. So where's the mistake here? The inclination I want to train out of you immediately is that when the action starts kicking up, what I want you to do is, instead of press S with all our abilities ready, and we nearly have Nanoboost, I want you to press W. This instinct to play to survive above all else is what is going to hard stuck keep you in platinum and below. The enemy is committing to play the game here. And not only that, we have teammates in aggressive positioning. Our Hanzo is on an off angle. We have a concave on the enemy, and the enemy is popping Cole. One of the biggest counters to Cole is an anti-nade. But imagine if we put our line of sight stepping into this play earlier at the moment that things were kicking off. There was natural cover here on our left, where we can see most of the enemy. We can press up to the cart itself and use it as natural cover. Brawling a bit with our Rhine, pressuring the enemy's Rhine, and sneaking in a nade will confirm this team fight outright. What our Ana hero did here by jumping away from the play is what I like to call sleeping on the engage, or sleeping on the play. We're taught oftentimes that surviving is the most important thing in Overwatch. But in the modern era of Overwatch as a hero shooter requires specific pieces of the team comp to aggressively step into the play to interact with the things that they can counter. And there's very few things in the entire game where you can just defend carefully and survive and win. Doesn't really happen. And Ana is the key support to need to unlock this mindset, because if you do not aggressively anti-something in this fight, you've contributed nothing and just let the enemy launch all their abilities onto your team while you spectated it. You stayed alive, great, but it's actually better to land key abilities that resolve the fight and help you win, even if you die, rather than be so far out of the play that you can't really help anybody and you let them get run over while you just watch it happen. So at this point of the video, you might be scratching your head and saying, well, Frito, if I play that aggressive, I'll just be dying left and right. Well, not if you make use of the two main ways that Ana's gonna be able to survive, using natural cover on the map and by using your teammates as cover. In this clip, our Ana hero is standing in the middle of every line of sight. It's so easy to see from this alternate camera view. The entire enemy team can shoot us if they decided to. And in another fight, we play this position incorrectly again, standing out in the open line of sight, not hugging any cover. And King's Row is a map famous for its cover position. Look at where your Junkrat is. The Alderworth Hotel is a great place for supports to pivot around. And especially if you have a Junkrat in close range, holding his hand means that anything walking in there will just get blown up. Playing from there would give you cover from the soldier's line of sight out in the open, as well as see and heal all the same targets you were already looking at. The other option would be to play inside your Orisa's bunker for a duration while the shield is up, but the only place we can't be is out in the open in the only place there isn't cover. So consider this as part of like your APM fluidity checklist, where while you're trying to get line of sight on your team, add in the wrinkle of positioning around safety to avoid getting shot at. The simple test for any position in Overwatch is if an enemy high noon could be cast out in the open and I can't get around cover to easily dodge it, I'm out of position. This is what makes the Alderworth Hotel such a pivotal point of King's Row, where on this corner, look how I easily can jiggle in 1 second behind cover and be fully immune from the soldier's line of sight with aimbot. And then yet again, this point of cover can jiggle to see enemies walking towards the Alderworth Hotel, making this position a combo that denies most of the access points to the space around the objective. When you combine this cover use with the jiggle peeking and quickscope tech we covered in the mechanics section, you'll realize how much you can play around cover and still do everything you need to do. What you want to have happen is Soldier to waste his ammo on the Orisa shield. What you don't want is to give him a better target out in plain view. Here's another example of this on a different map. This is a decent angle for Ana to play on Route 66, but there's two pieces of very usable cover on our right, which would have allowed us to see everything we could have seen already, but instead, we're standing in the maximally open position. Look at our team using natural cover in the cart really well. We're the only player this Widow could have even shot at. So again, you either have to straight up duel that Widow or just use cover better. And since she has the advantage, that's definitely the decision you want to make. Here's a clip where I do this against an enemy Widow, and notice how I mix my priorities during this regroup phase. I want to heal my team so they stay up and peek out quickly to try to find any pressure when I can, but not overstaying my welcome, just poking my head out, looking for abilities or damage to hit. And as the team fight begins to be lost again, it's time to get behind cover. And by the time I begin to get to the right-hand side, I'm under heavy duress. There's an enemy Widowmaker out in the open and tanks that are trying to stuff the door to confirm a kill on me. Staggering my death here would be a massive disadvantage for the defense, but I want to stay out enough because my staggering teammates are fighting and need healing, so it's a bit of a risky gamble. But healing myself, ducking away, and getting behind this piece of cover makes it very difficult for the enemy Widowmaker to peek out to get me. I'm at chip health most this time, but the Widow would have to come wide out into the open to get me, allowing me to let my teammates block for me, and when I need to heal, I quickly swing out of cover to hit my shot and go back in. These little survival tactics are so important because it gives you extra cycles on your cooldowns. Every time you shake and bake to survive a little bit longer, you get another nade and sleep out, which pretty quickly ramp up your carry potential. Keep in mind as well, as you're rotating through the potential death that surrounds you, you can use Sleep Dart to extend your positioning, which is to say, if your mechanics are sound and you're confident that you can hit it on the one target that's likely to come fight you, you can stay in positions a little bit longer. This clip showed a variety of two things. I went extra passive on the broken wall to heal my team as the enemy were winning the fight, especially on chip health myself, meaning that as we peel back, our team has a huge health advantage holding their position, which bought enough time for me to get my anti-nade back to land it on the enemy brig, our respawns come back, and we start fragging again. That gives me an opportunity to W further into the play to look for more action and get more value. Unfortunately, my teammate dies before I can help him. And with both cooldowns on deck, I can apply a nutty amount of pressure. It won't amount to anything because my teammates died, unfortunately, but holding those cooldowns until the maximal point of impact let me play that position. So although Ana has no mobility per se, because she has interactions in dueling, sleeping a Roadhog or Winston will extend your positioning potential. And it's somewhat required for you to make space up against the many threats that are going to come after you. But Ana's abilities are so strong that if you have strong movement to weave in and out of cover, you can accomplish some pretty nutty things. Look at this clip as I weave in and out of this small cavernous kind of catacombs area, hallway cover spot, and lure two tanks up against me, but do a combination of keeping tight to the cover as well as rotating around my tanks. As they swoop in to try to overwhelm me, rotating around the cover to play Ring Around the Rosie with them, lures them into a significant mutual nade that hits both of them and confirms that team fight rather easily. The payload can be used to do this as well. A character like Roadhog can be devastating to Ana, but between your sleep being a threat to him and the cover of the payload breaking the line of sight of his hook, well, I can sort of like almost bait him into fighting me. But after I use my cooldowns, I book it, looking towards the direction I want to go to maximize my move speed, to the next piece of cover. The enemy tries to commit right then and there on the corner, punish them with a nade, and you can kind of see how this cycle works, right? I'm going to play more aggressively towards the action when my cooldowns are up, carefully land them, and then get out. And whereas other characters like, let's say, Reinhardt might use his shield to move from cover to cover, Ana uses her abilities as a threat to the enemy to either punish anyone who challenges her, or at least give the vague impression that she might to kind of deter their movement. Now, you'll have the easiest time when you're working around natural cover, but you also want to incorporate using your teammates' bodies as cover as well, because obviously you want to keep line of sight with them as they move forward, but you want them in front of you so that you can heal them because you are easily focused down, which means your rotations through the chaos of the fight, you'll want to make sure to not become the front line yourself. So this requires some awareness of where the enemy is set up in front of you. And what you don't want to do is step in front of your front lines formation without any natural cover or an ability to secure a duel directly and just absorb focus fire from the enemy. At any point, this Rhine at 80%, you might as well have assumed he already had it. We should be 15 meters away from the shatter in order to not get hit by it and die, which means I'd prefer you to play this corner and peek in and out to try to heal the team and be ready to dodge in case a shatter does come through. But what is completely inexcusable is to use nade at half health and step into this line of sight now. Whereas we can stay safe here, shooting into the mess of all of this and healing our team, being somewhat passive and being in the line of sight of our Ana, definitely winning. The only way we can lose is if we become too easy of a target in the chaos. And wouldn't you know it, finally that Brig stun does come through to punish us, when the Brig could have been the one making the mistake and dying here. While interacting with the game with a press W inclination matters when you're landing abilities, remember that existing to just line of sight well and heal or damage pressure with your primary fire can be good as well. And at the very least, it's better than dying. And it'll take a combination of improving your mechanics and mastering the interactions of the game to really know where that line is for you. The more skilled you are, the more BS you can get away with. But there are some key rules that you probably never want to break, no matter what tier you're at. And becoming the front line is definitely one of them. This is an egregious example of exactly that, where we're winning this team fight, but because we think contesting the objective is so important for us to do, we walk into 2 characters that easily kill us just to die on the cart and feel better about the enemy capturing. Notice that I don't think I've mentioned the objective at all in the guide yet, have I? Doesn't matter. Ana doesn't play the objective. In Overwatch, the game is about converting team fights, and the objective kind of just orients that a little bit. There's many ways we could have stepped onto this objective if we more confidently set up the sleep on the wrecking ball, or hit a mutual to nade ourselves and the enemy so that we stay alive. But realistically speaking, I'd rather you just not really try to focus on the objective above the team fight. It's just not our job to worry about this, even if the enemy caps the whole point, okay? Getting the whole objective. The problem with C9ing in the Overwatch community is that you remember the times the C9 was like some big mistake, but it is usually like 1 out of 10 times where the C9 itself was the reason you lost. Catching completely free deaths like this are gonna lose you 9 out of 10 games, because Overwatch is a hero shooter. It's about landing your abilities, getting your ultimate, and casting it over and over and over again. The best way to think about Ana is hold great positioning and contribute it to the team fight until the enemy dies. Like, that's your goal. Overwatch is not an objective-based game, so never die for it. Instead, what we should focus on doing is making sure we're behind our tanks. Just pick a teammate to help fight and finish killing the enemy, even if you see 9. Now, that clip was one where we walked into a dive threat to let them overwhelm us, but often the dive threats will be coming in fast and furious onto you, so you need to be able to combine cover use as well as blocking with your teammates, spacing with them well in order to survive. In these series of clips, what I'm going to attempt to do is, as the flank comes in behind me, I want to W towards the teammate that most easily deals with that threat. Now, in some cases, you can duel the threat in your own, but that requires more skill to do. Much easier to just rotate appropriately so that the matchups pan out in your favor. Far too many times you see Ana players who get harassed or dove and hold their position, assuming it's the team's job to lose all their position to come kill the thing fighting the Ana. No. Your job is to run towards daylight, run towards the safety of your team. In this team comp, I've got a Roadhog and a Brigitte who heals me and easily stun combos onto things that want to dive. And we're playing a Reinhardt who has a big scary hammer. You want to use your movement to pull that aggro that's coming onto you to be forced to face your teammates that are better at fighting it. The way to survive isn't by running away from the threats necessarily, but by setting up a favorable engagement. So here's a good clip because it evolves what I said earlier. I'm keeping line of sight with my team. I'm playing in the back. I'm safe. Team fight's breaking out. We're getting surrounded. I try to find some cover, which helps me dodge the enemy's gravitic flux, survive during the EMP, and 2 enemy targets turn to come fight me, the Lucio and the Tracer. Attempt a mutual nade. Once I use nade here, I either have to kill them in the next second or make use of my other support's healing while I'm heal amped to survive the pressure I'm receiving. Either way, my team is pressing forward, so it's time for me to press forward with them. I'm attempting to get to the hacked health pack. It just barely doesn't come up in time. That would have saved my life here, but I extend my life in this situation a full couple seconds longer than I think most Ana players would if you just stood still. Worse yet, scoped up for the Tracer and Lucio to focus you down. You have to play actively to navigate the chaos of the team fight, dodging your bad matchups and leading them into your teammates' good matchups. Here's an example where Fielder looks unkillable in the chaos of this fight, where look at the moment-to-moment decision-making he makes here. Houston are capping. Dallas has to do something about it. So they set up a dive with a nade into the backline. That's their attempt to establish a win condition. Without a nade, the enemy's Tracer, Dante, takes the opportunity to W towards the backline. As soon as Fielder sees Dante, he's jumping out the window to get the heck out of there. I got a W to my team right now. Standing here is instant death. Cherry on top, he lands the sleep while falling for style points and tries to call for a burst combo to confirm the elim. Tracer recalls out of it. No good. That means the Tracer's behind him. Time to W further. Dive comes in. Winston zapping him. Fielder pivots around his Brigitte for a moment until there's a lane to duck in towards this next bit of cover and a mini health pack in the center. And it's just ring around the rosy at this point. I mean, it's just getting absolutely insane. Building up for these cooldown cycles and eventually a nano boost onto Hanbin resolves the fight. Nut survivability from Fielder there. Oh, and by the way, Houston did get a pick in that fight, which should have made this pretty difficult for Dallas, but with just the two supports playing around each other so well, working up to nano boost, Dallas's formation was better, even if they were at a man disadvantage for a period. Here's a clip of me doing some of this step-by-step decision-making in order to stay alive. I failed to save my Reinhardt on the hook, lose nano, the enemy pops some ults that eliminates my other tank, so I call to my Brigitte to fall back. A Tracer is on our Mega, meaning that me and my Brig will need to play together in order to escape out of here. As I'm on my way out, I'm looking to try to land aggressive value as I'm escaping, as any pressure I apply will reduce how much pressure the enemy have to apply back to us. We come out safely, our tank comes back, and now it's time to regroup to W again. This time, I don't let the Roadhog beat my Reinhardt, at least not the first hook anyway, and things are really getting out of hand. Molten Core preventing my approach, so I have to wrap around, and Lucio shouldn't be a weak duel for Ana. You just need some careful ability placement, and this is a skill set that I think like 90% of ranked players could benefit from improving at, that you kind of never need to die if you're good at this. And what I mean is, it's entirely possible to rotate so perfectly based on reading the threats of the game that you never bite off more than you can chew. And what you want to do when calling for a regroup or not is just reading how many threats the enemy have and how much pressure you can apply. What plays can you make? Are there easy kills in front of you that you can go for? If not, hunker back down on some cover. But conversely, here's the other end of the spectrum where this team fight on Dorado, I'm noticing that there isn't pressure to go take a aggressive position, one that is going to end up punishing this enemy Reinhardt who is pushing out of the choke. So it's a combination of seeing what the enemy is giving you. How much is there for you to take? What's the likelihood of success if you press in aggressively? How important is it for you to do so? When it's close to our spawn, I think I'd say I'm a little bit more risky in my play because the enemy doesn't really want to even fight out here. There's certain points on maps where the objective of the team as a whole is you have to fully clear off the cart. This team fight here is getting scrappy and we don't really have the damage to fight this backline other than me and Zarya. The window we have to close this team fight out here and now required my damage to rush into the enemy's backline and confirm these kills now, which is an aggressive positioning you can sustain against enemy backliners when you know you have the tools to work with. Rushing in with a tank when you have nano boost means that you can pivot around them and give them an extra life, which is going to work out better for both of you. Now, in this next section, I want to talk about the importance of high ground. And as I said earlier, it's important to get the line of sight being in the play first and foremost, but it's an added bonus when there are bits of high ground you can use because it keeps you safe from all manner of things. As the enemy Reinhardt with nano boost rushes into our backline, there isn't any shot that we hit this entire fight that wouldn't have just been easier and safer if pre-fight we established on the high ground. If a bit of high ground is going to definitely see the play and you have downtime, you'll want to go secure it. Again, pushing the objective is not your responsibility. It only goes a few percentage points faster with multiple people on it. It kind of doesn't matter, really. It's negligible. Let a tank push it. You're a carry player, not an objective player. You play a carry pick on the objective, the enemy brawlers are going to select you out and send you to respawn where you can't carry. And a good tip in general, and I did say this in my McCree Mastery guide as well, which you might learn a lot of similar skill sets, but if you're ever in a position where an enemy tank can hit you, and that includes Earth Shatter and Graviton Surge, then you're out of position. You want it to be very expensive for a Zarya Beam or a Rein Earth Shatter to somehow land on you. High ground is a great way to avoid that, but just in general, you'll want to keep your spacing away from those threats and use teammates to block whenever possible. But otherwise, the major benefit of high ground is the pressure opportunities it affords you. Between Ana's damage and anti-nades over the top, enemies walking out into the open are free kills. And the lower rank you are, the more powerful just standing on high ground and being a turret is going to be. We saw this in Awkward's Unranked to GM, where in his medal rank matches, he largely just stood in one spot and took duels and won team fights easily. Well, easy when you have tier 2 pro aim. It's safe to say that Ana's entire playstyle is just easier from high ground. Nades are easier to land because you pretty much just pick a spot on the ground and it goes exactly where you want. And of course, high ground gives you natural cover, where when you look down from high ground, it's possible to only show part of your hitbox model when enemies are looking up at you, whereas you can see the entirety of them. Also, having a vantage point makes target selection much easier. You can have your pick of any target, meaning your uptime of how many shots you even have available to hit will simply be higher. Gibraltar is a great map for this, as it has absolutely legendary high ground positions, which are like 3 stories high. The most OP high ground in the game, I think. And another advantage is just having more options. For a character without mobility, being on high ground pre-fight means that you have the option to fall off it, which is important because if cooldowns are getting used or something's developing, having a plan B is better than being stuck where you are without an option. Junkertown C has some outrageously powerful high ground that frankly, a huge percentage of players underutilize. So what I think almost every Ana player I see does is just ride cart in this situation. But I'm going to look for an opportunity for a bit of downtime where my team doesn't need healing to sneak up to the high ground with a clear vantage point into their backline. The enemy, like most players, don't think the high ground matters. They're just going to walk to the objective because this is an objective-based game to them, or at least the players on the losing team. So because of that, even though I miss my nade here, the sleep and shots and line of sight is just too easy. Using high ground to create crossfires or land abilities is OP. So OP that the entire game revolves around it. Now, a great pro example of this is Twilight playing on top of Gibraltar's ship, which is essentially Ana's dream scenario for high ground. Little tiny chokes for the enemy to walk through, and a massive vantage point to launch nades and damage from. Anytime the enemy begins to poke their head out, there's an Ana nade waiting to nuke them, meaning the gladiators have to outplay this nade perfectly, and that's tough to do when every 10 seconds from this position, it's bombs away. You can only defend in that hole for so long, gladiators. They're trying to break out, but eventually an Ana nade gets in deep enough to land on the enemy Brigida, and all it takes is Smurf using Primal Rage to just clean up everybody in that room once the anti-nade is hit. So this is a combination of the philosophy of how to use nade, apply pressure, but applied to the positioning of maps where there's so many spots in the game that if you're just willing to attempt to make a play from, you will fully carry the game until the enemy deals with you in that position. I would say at probably like somewhere between 70 and 80% of ranked players do not know how to deal with high ground at all, or don't commit to use it properly to make plays. I don't think it's that deep, actually. Go up top, hit abilities, kill things. Players sometimes are uncomfortable playing this aggressively, but I think it's a lack of experience or game knowledge in what interactions you're even looking for when hunting down plays like this. And the trick is picking out the vulnerable targets. And what you want to do is use your sleep to incapacitate big health point threats that you wouldn't be able to kill, and use your nade to lock down vulnerable targets, which really is only a tank if they're already low. Otherwise, the damage from the nade alone on a squishy is going to be pretty devastating for them, setting them to effectively one-shot against most things. So using your positioning advantage to just pummel the enemy with that philosophy is going to really take over games. It's so powerful that a spot like the Rialto staircase here might as well be its own field of immortality, another position that is woefully underused by the community. Professional Overwatch players can sometimes struggle to ever capture Rialto streets due to the power that this staircase affords you. You can use it to see the fight on the cart, or wrap around to flank into the backline. The options to select the right target are so vast that you never have to be fighting the wrong thing. And that might require a more advanced targeting video, but the short answer to it is, do you or your team have the capability to kill the target that you're looking at? And if not, turn away and fight something else. That calculation becomes a bit easier the better your mechanics are. I hope you could realize that with how badly players play the map, in Overwatch most of the time. If you play it well, you just need your mechanics to be okay, and Ana's powerful kit will do the rest for you. But I know it's not always that easy, so that's why this next section is all about Chaos Control. These clips are all about when things are kind of going wacky, and it's difficult to discern what the right play is to do. In this clip, you're going to notice me rotate 3 times. I start by playing this main choke, putting pressure on the enemy's flying DPS. Unfortunately, running out of ammo, so I can't really punish the resin time. But we do get Nanoblade off. Nade unfortunately misses during the frames of invulnerability with the res. OP, please nerf. And Echo makes a beeline for my face, laning the projectile into a hallway. This isn't too threatening, and we dispatch of the Echo, but she's gonna get up in 5 seconds, and there's a Roadhog in my face. And I'm 9 seconds away from my next nade, which means I am not self-sufficient in this position, especially when Echo wakes up. So this means I'm gonna make a beeline to get to the mini health pack, which provides a bit of cover for me to jiggle out from. We're trying to cap the point, but need to resolve a limbs on the staggers. With the Echo waking up, I'm attempting to go back to get line of sight on anything she fights, which puts a small window where I could be attacked from the main angle from the Hanzo we're not sure is at this point. But luckily for me, he kills our Widowmaker instead. So at this point, I have a decision. Do I reestablish in the ranged position off the point behind me, which is relatively safe? But I, kill hungry, instead try to stay in the brawl a bit more to help confirm the kill on the Moira. But now again, I'm without my escapes and low on health, taking some zap from Winston. There's a health pack below him and one in the corner that I used earlier, but either of them would make Winston easily zap me down, so I have to get away from him. Pivoting around the cover, I'm low on health, and I'm attempting to get to the next point of cover, heading towards the mega health pack on coast side, while hitting shots. The Winston recognizes my reposition, and I pull him towards me. With just over 100 health, if I don't look away right now, he will easily zap me down. But doing so, I keep 1-to-1 with his movement, and I sneak away to the mega. I don't contribute any healing in that time and everything, but doesn't matter. I had to do that to survive. Turn back towards the Winston now, locked and loaded with both abilities and full health. He already used Leap to chase me. Bubble a little while ago. This is an easy sleep. Sleep him and turn towards helping my Reinhardt. I hit a mutual nade on all 3 of us, healing Rein, myself, and anteing the Mercy. We could go to capture the point here, but again, resolving the team fight is what's going to win the game. If we run to point now, we might get a tick while Winston sleeps off to the side, but we won't win the game. The respawns will overwhelm us, so I W towards the Mercy to finish her. Luckily here, my Rein is on the same page. If he abandoned me here, this fight would be over, but he cleans up the Winston, puts him in a room, pins him, ball comes at me, we sleep him again. This is some wacky pandemonium, but playing together around my Lucio and around my Reinhardt, who thankfully played with me, made this clutch team fight possible. Genji comes back on the respawn. To let him stand and deliver, I apply a nano, and look at this. We're back at square one, finally at the safe position we were trying to establish from the entire time, down in center. And what we have achieved now is control of the whole point, right? Whereas every single time before this, the enemy had high ground somewhere, had a flank, had a dive coming in, and each time we had to rotate around in order to survive razzle dazzle and deathmatch. Being single-minded focused on the objective at any point would have lost the team fight. But playing towards cover and my team, or for key duels at those crucial points, helps swing the fight back in our favor. It seems like a whole lot to process, but I think when you establish your APM checklist, it becomes a bit more rote. In terms of start of the fight, looking to pressure. When you don't have nade, you'll want to play safer around cover. And when you do have a sleep that you think you can land, well, you can actively step into the sleep duel, which can net you a free kill. Holding that space as Ana on very high percentage chance sleeps exerts your pressure onto the map, whereas a lot of Ana players play scared and hide, but really it's cycling that pressure that extends not just your life, but your playmaking. And as you duck out, look for a cheeky sleep, turn the corner, see a crossfire that you've just accidentally developed. Well, now it's simple, right? Just focus down the Discord target, get a kill, and as you cycle through these things, your mechanical skill set that we started at the beginning should carry some of this process as things get kind of out of control, attempting to do the most with the situation you're given, and stick to the fundamentals of apply pressure, use your abilities to create a threat, position around cover and safety while keeping line of sight on your teammates and the play wherever it is. You keep rotating that with an active mindset rather than a passive one, then you'll take over the game. For the next section, I want to talk about using Nanoboost and the ult phase in general, and the different ways to use your ult and how you want to interact with everybody else's. Some basic principles of Nanoboost applies damage amplification and damage resistance, as well as healing a target in a burst. So the most clear examples of when to pop Nano are when a teammate is committing to a fight and receiving too much focus fire. Popping it then can turn what should be an advantage for the enemy into an advantage for you. Because due to how the math works out, it's pretty difficult for enemies to quickly burst down anything while nano boosted, especially if you use it to heal, getting a burst of life from that, and added durability, then more life from you, and probably a nade. Comboing that can really keep a target alive in the clutch, and I stress to not hesitate to make that read and pull nano. Far too often do I see Ana players who just have really bad nano timing, either nanoing ahead of the play to make it obvious where the nano's coming from, or a fight's broken out and committed, there's chaos happening, teammates need help, we're holding nano for, I don't know, the next game maybe. Don't do that. No matter who it is, basically. If they're taking out too much heat, just nano them, because the best way to get value out of nano is have a teammate who is aggressively in position to land anything. So as long as they're in range of the enemy, it can get some value. Now, there's a few considerations you want to take on with this is what's the position of the enemy, the state of the battlefield, and the teammate that you're giving it to. Do they have the tools to go in if they need to go in further? In this situation, I note that Nateson used a bunch of blinks and recall, but I hit an anti-nade in the back, and we're just trying to clean this fight up right now. So the added bit of burst on the nano boost is just going to confirm this fight quickly so that there isn't stallers. So since I need my Tracer to just kind of stand and deliver damage, this nano's fine. This next nano is with Tracer coming out of spawn. I actually ask him here, does he have blinks? He says yes, so that means I know he can close the distance, I can give him nano and return back to healing my team. What you don't want to do is nano a teammate that has used all their abilities and ammo and needs to reload everything, wasting time of the nano. You can improve your intuitive sense of this if you just look at what abilities they've used, or if they're in a reload animation. As an example here, my Roadhog is using vape, not under threat, so I just wait a little bit longer to use Nano Boost to try to extend how much time he's going to get to use it. If he doesn't need the health and the durability, just wait a little longer, pop it on him, and then automatically we have a sustained advantage in this fight because I had just slept the enemy's nano boost, which means my nano being later will get more value, which is the nature of all support ults. Here's an example where I nano a Widowmaker, which is like one of the worst nanos maybe, but due to the scrappiness of this fight and the importance of this position and the swing factor present, I decide to do it. I had a sleep on the Tracer. My Widow teammate is scoping up to follow up on that sleep. You have to ask yourself, are we committed to trying to win this fight? Well, if we weren't, we shouldn't have been fighting this whole time anyway. We should have been regrouping. So these clutch like tempo nanos that maybe just get 1 to 2 kills is definitely the way to go. Because even though I go down in this, my team maintains the high ground, and my Widowmaker can continue to confirm kills after I've used all my cooldowns anyway. Staying alive to get another cycle of them, yeah, that's always great. But if you get everything out, and you're definitely gonna die, but the fight's still continuing, pick your best teammate to try to get the most out of that fight. Remembering, sending enemies to the respawn room in so many cases is required even for your next retake fight. Okay, now the next segment of Nano Boost ults is combining with teammate ults, where ideally you want to wait until the moment of impact where it's going to surprise the enemy. So I don't want a nano soldier before he jumps out of the window. I want to do it as he jumps out with visor, because I don't want the enemy to have a sound cue that Nano Boost is coming. The durability of Nano Boost helps teammates that use channeling ults like Dragon Blade or McCree's High Noon, but timing it as they're using it is the extra little wrinkle trick that I want you guys to implement, where McCree had good timing on his High Noon flank, but his time to kill is even faster if I apply Nanoboost as he hits high noon, really shrinking the time of the one-hit kill zoning ultimate. Now, another tip for you. Your job is not over once you commit Nanoboost. Remember the line of sight lessons we talked about earlier when attributing Nanoboost to a teammate. If your Genji is calling out that they have Genji Blade ready, it's typical for a Genji to launch themselves in the air to become an easy target, but it requires the Ana player to be stepped into that line of sight and ready. I think Ana players often don't know, and it might be because they're used to their DPS not being skilled enough, but the breakpoint thresholds of Nanoboost are so important to DPS's interactions. Like, you can't expect them to get kills a lot of the time unless you nano them appropriately. So even if you don't trust them to be good, you gotta give them the ball sometimes. Awkward's Unranked to GM showed this discernment pretty well, where although some of his teammates weren't deserving of nano at all, some of them were and just did fine. You know, it's not too difficult to swing a massive blade at the enemy vaguely to confirm kills with it on you. So a lot of times it's on you to just time the nano well. But on top of that, once you do commit the nano, especially onto a dive target, try to run up with them. It would be big brain of the enemy to dodge the nano and come attack you, but often they just try to peel back away from the nano target. And because of that, pocketing them on the run can be pretty easy. The thing about Nanoboost that's important to realize is that Ana gets ult pretty fast. And due to her deathmatchy playstyle anyway, you don't really want to play for ult economy like you might with other supports. Ana as an entire playstyle, her ult included, requires you to find some aggression somewhere because she's not really good at defense. And since it's going to charge up again quickly anyway, if you're doing the rest of her kit right, be sure to let the nano loose on a team fight if you're committed on winning it. I can't stress this enough. A lot of this advice starts to compound onto each other this deep into a video, but notice how our Ana player isn't really playing with anybody. Our team is setting up the exact kind of engagement that we can utilize in order to full out win this map by holding until 100%. But what our Ana does is, rather than looking to create a point of impact on where the engage is about to be with our flanking DPS or our Winston, setting up on the right hand side by the mini health pack where your team was actually fighting would have been better to begin with anyway, because you would have supported them, your line of sight would be on them rather than standing in vague land. But either way, you want your abilities to hit as the engagement begins. Standing here, we made ourselves a very easy dive target and didn't let our dive do anything, because we didn't give them the tools to utilize. With any support or nano boost, those two DPS could have went down, and more importantly, fed Winston his primal rage, which gives him an extra life. So you can see, if you don't commit in your abilities, nano boost included, into the fight before you go down, your team isn't down a player, it's down possibly the star player in all six, the entire team. Ana is such a strong character that you should be getting strong value out of her every fight. Next up, let's talk about key hero matchups and how you want to go about fighting them. If the enemy has a Roadhog on their team, you should be ecstatic. Pork is for dinner. Ana hard counters Hog, unlike many hero interactions do. Reason being is that Ana's abilities outdo everything Hog wants to do. When Hog is lurking around attempting to get a hook, as long as you shoot the sleep the same time as the hook, you usually always save either yourself or a teammate with the sleep dart, because the hook isn't the deadly part, it's the shotgun follow-up that comes afterward. So even though Sleep has a bit of travel time, keeping your crosshair placement on the dual angle can punish him for poking his head out. Sleep also cancels whole Hog, which has been buffed to be a legitimate ultimate. And then just in general, when the enemy picks Hog, they have no defense. So anti-ing anything is easier with Hog on the enemy team, because he just doesn't protect against it in any way, but anti-ing him is also quite a counter, as it'll either prevent him from using Take a Breather, or better yet, punishing Take a Breather. What you want to do is bully Hog from range, or Sleep to interrupt him, and hold Nade until he's about to use Take a Breather. What that does is lock him in the Take a Breather animation, but denying him the healing from it. I mean, people make jokes that Hog is an ult battery, and well, Well, when he can't fight back and isn't healing himself, he most definitely is. So try to be greedier with your nade than you think, because remember, if you nade a full HP tank, you might not have the damage to finish him off. So try to think of it more as a way to finish the duel, to counteract his sustainability. It's a layer on top that counters as like a trap card. He uses breather, you use nade. Otherwise, to counter his ability to hook or go on flanks, disable him with sleep. A fancy trick layered on top is that as a teammate gets pulled in by the enemy's hog hook, it can set up a really easy multi-nade because, well, hog grouped your teammate in with them. This matchup shouldn't prove to be too difficult for you when you apply the other lessons from the guide. This is your strongest matchup, but it requires you to have that killer instinct. You are the hunter. These big shieldless tanks are the hunted. They don't bully you, you bully them, assuming you use your cover appropriately and the rest of your mechanics are sound. Next up is Ana versus Wrecking Ball, which is similar to Roadhog as there are wide open gaps in the enemy's defenses for you to land abilities, but a little bit trickier as Ball moves really fast. But you can make this easier on yourself by preparing your sleep with Crosshair Placement at the bottom of his pile driver when he goes for it. The metagame surrounding Ana versus Ball is largely information dependent. If Ball surprises Ana, the dive will overwhelm her easily, but if Ana knows where he's coming from, Ball gets scouted out, she can easily step towards him and sleep him even easier than Roadhog. Keep in mind as well, pro tip for Ana's teammates, or Ana herself, Sleep Dart is a hard counter against Adaptive Shield, which did get nerfed, so it's not as obnoxious as it used to be, but remember, if Ball rolls through your whole team and pops an Adaptive Shield, gaining a bunch of health, letting the Sleep Dart subside while the Adaptive Shield decays out is like effective damage. A key tip to remember on all sleeps really is that there is a sound effect of the player kind of snoring, I guess, that once the sound cue completes, the enemy will have a bit of a sluggish get up from the sleep animation. Whereas when a target is woken up immediately after a sleep, they kind of can get up immediately and move around without that sluggish, drowsy, I suppose, sleep effect. So try to listen for the sound cue to play fully and then have your teammates line up either headshots or get ready with your shot nade melee combo yourself to contribute as much burst as you can. The next matchup we want to discuss is Winston, who now begins to have some opportunities to counter Ana, but in a lot of situations, Winston is no different than how easy Wrecking Ball or Roadhog can be to disable. And the way to actualize that is to realize that Winston is vulnerable inside his bubble. So when a Winston dives on you, assuming you don't execute the jump tech we saw from Awkward earlier, rather than trying to escape out of his bubble, which you won't be able to do, instead commit into his bubble. Because think of it like this. Winston takes 4 seconds to kill you, more or less. Less time if he lands on you, but you at least have a couple seconds to take a breath and just walk towards him. It sounds silly, but he's a massive target. So funnily enough, in close range, you're a bigger threat to him than the other way around, because his gun will do the same damage within its range. But the closer you are, the easier it is for you to land your key abilities, namely sleep, but also nade. And if you are that close, it means when he pops bubble to defend himself, it's not going to help him. When it deploys, it creates a protective shell around him. So if you're at extreme close range against Winston and you have your cooldowns, you're not locked in there with him. He's locked in there with you. No, Scarlet, I am the danger, okay? And considering you have sleep and nade, either of them can be extremely hazardous to Winston's health. And especially since the vast majority of ranks don't successfully execute off-tank synergies with their main tanks, where a Zarya bubble or Diva defense matrix might protect Winston from this. Functionally, no players play at those ranks where that's going to be a problem for you as Ana. And it's going away with Overwatch 2 anyway. On top of that, Sleeping Primal Rage, just like with Wrecking Ball, is amazing value. And you can do this by luring him into diving you, either in a lane or giving him an easy corner where he wants to juggle you to beat your head in, and just time the delivery of your sleep in between his 2-second jump cooldown. It's pretty quick, but right after he uses jump, there's 2 seconds where he's not going to be able to jump again. So that means you either can chart the flight path of his leap, though characters do have a lot of mid-air movement, so it's a little tricky, but at the same time, he's massive, or wait till he settles down a bit in between jump uses. More importantly, though, the big way that Winston does counter Ana is with his bubble. Bubble, blocking the line of sight of Ana when she's out in the distance, is the way that Winston will counter you. But if you're stepping into the bubble to land value, it's a little tricky for him to do anything. And as well, the bubble can only do so much. So if you're in high ground, you'll have the options to either peer over the shield or dodge away from it when it blocks you. Next matchup, let's take a look at beating Bastion, who Ana almost single-handedly can counter. As long as you apply this principle, ignore the cart progress, okay? Objective doesn't matter. So do not position in relationship to the objective at all. Instead, flank the Bastion. Use high ground and exploit his immobility to land disables on him. If their shields or the enemy team is covering them or whatever, shoot those things until they're down and then disable the Bastion. Either way, do not contest the payload. It'll be much easier to halt the cart's progress when Bastion isn't riding it than trying to contest it while he is. Next up, tough matchup for Ana players, Doomfist, who if your mechanics aren't coming correct, can be infuriating to play against. I hear this Doomfist coming, I step into the punch to try to sleep him and punish him, it just barely whizzes past his face. That is infuriating. But realize that this is where you're going to show off your turn, speed, and reaction skills. Goes from up high to down low to behind you instantly. So because of that, your sleep flicks are really going to be tested. Try to stay close to your Zarya, who can bubble you as the dive comes in, or really any teammate that is strong against Doom. And don't do what I'm doing in some of these clips, rushing my abilities too fast. Similar to Roadhog, just with a higher degree of difficulty, you'll want to pick out points to take the duel with Doom confidently to sleep him, or really avoid the fights with him pre-fight ahead of time. The problem a lot of Ana players have is they know they're against a flanker, and then the flank comes in, and they're almost surprised they have to deal with it, when you got to decide, either you hold your ground and you're going to beat him in the footsie battle, or you W with your team. If you stay back, you're asking for a flank to come in on you. These principles go very often for Tracer as well, who is a typical character that backliners chase around the map, as opposed to ignoring them to W to get value aggressively. That applies even more so against Doomfist, because Doom is a character that has incredibly easy kills when you don't take map control away from him. Here we're playing with our tank, who gets a counter pin on the Doom, putting him on the ground, finishing him off with a nade. Great. The brawl ensues and kills get traded out, but the problem is that map control stage of the post fight, those little skirmishes for map advantage, are so important up against Doomfist. We won last fight and got some cart progress, but the problem is Doom spawned before us, so he's already taking map position. Now, we've got the cart and the ramp finally, but it's in this key window that we have to go up top. We have to, because if we don't, Doom will turn the corner and launch himself down the ramp again, remembering that Seismic Slam deals more damage when he launches from a high point to a low point. In that moment where he doesn't have cooldowns to come back in, we have to get the heck away from our positional disadvantage on the ramp and move up to our actual objective, which is the mega high ground on the right-hand side, which would have created the crossfire that can punish Doom trying to launch down the ramp. Failing to do this in this key window means that we're sent back to spawn and forced to fight on the ramp again. Doom comes in, gets his free kill, is totally feeding, uses all his cooldowns just for that one kill, but okay, classic Doom. We swing on him and kill him. Okay, time to go get ground, right? Almost have Nanoboost. Our Ryan's on the cart. Ball's rolling in. Doom's in spawn. Our squishies are still on the low ground ramp. Minefields deployed. All the space in the world. We can go anywhere on the map we want. And we throw a nade into a shield. Then back up to heal a Wrecking Ball who's antied, who can roll to go get a Mega anyway. And here, we're deciding we don't want to win the game. We step backwards, back down the ramp in that key window, again, where the Doom's in spawn, don't heal our Reinhardt, don't nano him so he can't move forward anymore, and lose all the ground we just gained. Winston dives our backline, requiring us to peel, and just the team fight's over. We decided to fight in the wrong location. So this is where map control just is everything up against Doom. And again, it's another instance where the pressure to go aggress is what denies the enemy's ability to aggress onto you. Either you have a launch point to hit an anti-nade easily, or the Doom has a launch point to easily hit Seismic Slam. The ground that is good for both is kind of the same. What you can't do is be afraid of the matchups and retreat back into bad ground where you're going to die anyway. You might as well step forward to engage in the gameplay as opposed to hide from it and get smacked in the face by positional advantage. In the next section, I want to talk about adjusting your Ana playstyle in different team comps, particularly challenging ones like not having a shield. Well, key tips for that is that your use of cover is even more important, as your tank line won't be providing any. So that means up against this enemy Widowmaker, I'm attempting to make my face as sparse as possible. Quick peek to toss a sleep dart, but otherwise I attempt to stay around cover to avoid her line of sight. When the enemy has a shield and you don't, you'll either have to pressure it down before you can advance or simply flank it. And the more flanky your front line is, say like a wrecking ball rolling around in the back line, the more flanky you'll need to be. Often I see Ana players playing with a Roadhog and wrecking ball who are off doing their own thing, but they play positions as if they had a Reinhardt brawling. Don't do that. Free up your thought process to just simply look to scale how aggressive you do or don't go. And oddly enough, the less defense your tanks have, the more aggressive you need to be. Not to say you feed constantly, but you want to peek out for riskier plays because playing safe isn't going to result in much. Like, someone's got to go make a play to really get those deathmatchy style comps to work. When you are just safely poking though, you can take cover, farm up a lot of healing, and look for a key nanoboost timing. But if your hog successfully does land a hook, be ready with your abilities to pound into the target to confirm the kill, especially required if it's a tank, and more so if it gets saved with an ultimate like Nanoboost. Cover use and chaos control is even more important in times like these, as you'll really have to work to try to extend your life as long as you can, looking to apply pressure that your team can follow up on. Keep in mind that a target that you hit a sleep on is a free hook kill for your Roadhog, in the same way that anting a squishy can be a free kill for a Winston to chase down. Speaking of Winston, let's look how to play around a Winston teammate. In the mid-fight, operate around cover like you would without a shield. Consider Winston's bubble to be a bonus, not for the break of the engage, like a Reinhardt barrier protects you as you walk in, but instead to extend your flexibility after the engage. You work around cover, Winston dives in, drops a bubble. It gives you extra opportunities for rotating and getting line of sight. Speaking of line of sight, you'll notice that I'm attempting to run in with my Winston on his dives, at least to the extent that my scope can see him. That's important. I go up to the high ground on Blizzard World B here, which is a power position, but as I notice my Winston teammate either doesn't seem to know where I am or doesn't seem to realize that that is the easily win the game position, he's favoring the right. So to adjust with that, play with where your Winston wants to play, as opposed to where you think he should be playing. Because really, you just gotta combo your abilities in on his dives and make use of his presence. And he'll accidentally point towards things you've antied to finish them off. Ideally, you'll want to land a nade on the target Winston either can dive or as he's diving, so it heals him and hits them, or you can bail him out with an extra life with Nanoboost, heal bursting him and really adding some potency to his cleave. Don't let your Winston's bad dives be the detriment of your life, and instead get the most value you can out of them in terms of like gaining ult charge and supporting him, but don't overcommit to pocketing him if he's not outplaying anything. Instead, try to find a different playmaker on the team who can help convert team fights for you if Winston's not cutting it. Here's a round where I was particularly in sync with my Winston, but also deploying some chaos control in order to keep myself alive under duress while healing the Winston, which can be tough to do. Remember to utilize his bubble to get better LOS for yourself. Keep LOS on him, at least on major vantage points where he can retreat back to you. Once he feels some Ana heal darts on him from his back, he should get a sense of what you can and can't see. And if that's not happening, try to tell your Winston what you can see so he is clear on where he's got to retreat to in order to get healed. Here the enemy was either diving me or peeling for the Winston. And because my Mercy played so well, keeping me alive, and I dodged the minefield and bailed out our Winston with a Nanoboost once he was getting low, we were winning on both ends of the fight, making for this Route 66 C attack very easy, largely made possible from forward moving away from threats to navigate the chaos, and finding those aggressive windows to peek my line of sight towards my Winston regardless of where he went, to be sure to connect with healing in time in order to save him from getting eliminated. Ana and Winston are one of the strongest pairs of heroes in the game right now, emboldened by the fact that it's tough to stop Ana nades reliably if they're well placed, and Winston has the HP and speed to go chase them down. The San Francisco Shock do set plays with their Ana nades where Smurf's Winston dives in after them so that the jump pack lands as the nade gets there. Pretty advanced stuff. But one benefit with leading with the nade instead of the Winston dive is that you can almost confirm how purple or good it's going to be before the Winston commits himself to getting injured. Now, it's tricky because a anti-first nade won't heal the Winston up, so it almost like requires it to be a good purple. Whereas in some cases, maybe you could tank more on your Winston if you double hit him and one target as opposed to anti-ing 3, let's say. But in general, in most situations, the more aggression you can get away with, the more you're rewarded, even if it requires sacking a teammate in order to eliminate more of the enemy. And with that final section, we have reached the end of the Ana 2.0 Mastery Guide. Holy cow, what a big video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to remember to support the sponsors that support us. Opera GX's browser designed for gamers is really cool, and I think you'll like it. So click the link in the description or the pinned comment to try it out for free today. It helps out the channel and it'll hook you up with a dark mode that actually works, okay? So click to check that out and any of the other resources or sources we utilize today. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out. Lets us know that you're enjoying the content. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.